Hi, and welcome to Best in Tesla. So, JB Straubel, Tesla's board member and founder and CEO of Redwood Materials, was just interviewed about batteries, recycling, and energy demand. And one thing is sure, the demand for Tesla's energy storage system will basically be endless over the next many decades. This is such an underestimated part of Tesla's business, and it is about to shoot up like a rocket. So let's hear what JB had to say, and let's dive right in.
Well, Redwood Materials is well known as being a battery recycler, and that's where we started. But today we really have two main components to the business. One focused on critical materials, another focused on energy storage and second life energy storage from former transportation batteries.
How do you see the role of energy storage evolving in the AI era?
Well, I think energy storage is evolving, and batteries in particular are evolving to play, I think, an incredibly central part of the story, for the expansion of data center energy availability, but for the grid overall. And increasingly, I think people are beginning to sort of see that opportunity where if you can have the flexibility that energy storage provides, that gives you the chance to have access to more energy from the grid. And it also gives you a chance to manage and adjust the transients from some of these new loads, especially AI training loads.
Yes, batteries will play a central role in AI data centers and the growing demand for energy, and will help stabilize the grid. And Tesla has just revealed their new Megabox that will be a huge business for Tesla going forward. And Tesla is going to build a new factory for it that will have a 50 gigawatt hour capacity, getting Tesla up to 130 gigawatt hours of annual battery storage capacity. And they will just continue to build out as the demand for energy and energy storage will continue to grow. But battery storage will also make the already existing power plants more efficient and help the data centers be more efficient. And battery storage will even outperform traditional generators. So battery storage will make basically everything more efficient, no matter what we look at, and stabilize the grid. So Tesla's demand for their Megapacks and other storage products will not slow down. Quite the opposite for many, many years to come.
Are batteries the transitional solution? Do you see them being the long-term backbone of infrastructure? Where do you see the future of this really?
Well, I love batteries, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think energy storage is absolutely a new part of the infrastructure. I think it's not a transient, blip in time here where this is just bridging between one technology and another. But I think adding energy storage into the electricity, infrastructure is a fundamental shift. It just wasn't possible, economically or really even technically when the electricity grid was invented. But today, that's rapidly changing. And it can re-architect the entire way that, we think about the electricity network and how it can be used. I mean, imagine if fossil fuels had no ability to be stored. It would kind of blow your mind. But if we had to link every wellhead to every demand, instantaneously, that's how electricity is for the most part. And we're kind of undergoing this revolution where suddenly that's starting to decouple, and there is more of an ability to store it economically. And that suddenly changes, so then you can have, smaller, loads that are a little more decoupled and using their own storage. You can use more intermittent sources of generation more economically.
AI data centers, of course, driving unprecedented demand for stable, low-cost power. So we all are seeing them more. We're seeing them all over the place. Every time you look in the headlines, there's more and more data centers popping up. So how do you see batteries really supporting this need?
Well, I think relative to the data center electricity demand growth, batteries have two main functions or opportunities. One thing to be aware of, and I think it's been talked about, it'll probably come up again, is that the data center electricity demand is not steady. Many people think it's sort of steady, but it has a lot of variation at different, time constants. So it's very spiky. It turns on and off. It can ramp up and down, and that's how the computer scientists get the most efficiency out of those AI GPUs, training GPUs. But that puts an incredible stress on all of the electric components between the data center and the grid, all the way to the generators. It can even break generators because it's oscillating and ramping up and down. So batteries have, I think, a really, really critical role to play in stabilizing that load and letting the computer scientists who are wanting to optimize efficiency of the GPUs and computers do exactly what they want, make the loads ramp quickly, make them, very spiky and optimize, but also stabilize the load when you look into electric generators, so that then gas turbines or solar or nuclear, whatever it may be, can operate at its highest efficiency and utilization. So when you put a battery in the middle, you're able to decouple and unlock the efficiency of both elements of that.
When you stress battery storage, we're of course sitting in the state of Texas, which has this push for natural gas. So let's talk about, battery storage versus that alternative.
Well, it's really both, and I don't think batteries are at odds with natural gas generation. In fact, some of the projects we're, working on today are directly coupled to natural gas generation. One of the challenges, again, with gas generation tied directly to new data center loads is that you have to derate the turbines to such a degree to power what's called the IT load that, it becomes a little bit less economic. If you have to have 2 or 3 times the turbine rating to power, 1 unit of what's called IT load. And you have to do that because of this very transient, spiky nature of that. But if you can couple a gas turbine, natural gas generating turbine with a battery, you can go to a much higher, percent of the rated load on the gas turbine. So this makes it more economic, more efficient, and you can sort of then buffer that transient. So it's really both. And I see the batteries becoming sort of some fundamental new part of this infrastructure on how electricity can be optimized.
Yes, like I said, everything gets more efficient when you put battery storage into the mix. It's not just for renewables. They will work as a stabilizer between the grid and basically every energy generation, no matter the source. The electric revolution is changing the game, as we will get microgrids, virtual power plant, on-site generation, household generating their own energy, and so much more.
When you talk about electricity being optimized, let's talk a little bit about the grid. What innovations are needed to better integrate batteries into the grid? Power electronics, I'd say, are one of the really core pieces here. A battery in and of itself is a pretty dumb device. It can't really do much. It just has a, voltage curve that's not controlled. So, power electronics give you the ability to take this, sort of dumb electrochemical thing and make it into a very, very highly controllable asset that you can ramp, you can treat just like a dispatchable generator. So I think it's the advances in power electronics coupled with the advances in reduced costs in batteries that sort of combine to make that integrate very seamlessly into the grid. This also gives you the ability to form new microgrids. So when you have that power electronic control capability, a battery can do what's called dark start. It can do grid forming, or it can sort of create its own, AC waveform, an islanded grid, so that you don't have to rely on a very hard connection back to a big investor-owned utility in every single case. And that offers speed and some more flexibility.
Yes, power electronics, and I might just add software as well. One of the reasons why Tesla's batteries are better than even CATL can make them, even though Tesla's Megapacks has CATL's batteries inside them. It is Tesla's software like Autobeta, virtual machine mode, inverters, and all the other things that Tesla makes themselves that makes the magic of Tesla's Megapacks. And that is why Tesla ends up with something like the Megablocks that is something very underestimated, just how huge a deal the Megablocks is going to be for Tesla.
In terms of batteries, how's Redwood thinking about the trade-offs between battery reuse and recycling, especially as the U.S. EV market is shifting towards LFP?
It's a great question. So, at Redwood, we have a focus on what we call second life, or basically remanufactured, redeployed batteries that did a first life, perhaps in an automotive or transportation market. So we really work on how do we architect and put those old car batteries, refurbish them, and put them back in a stationary setting. We do this mainly because it's low cost. When you can spread that expensive battery asset across 2 different usages, we end up taking a pretty heavily depreciated asset, so we can offer a lot lower cost points for grid energy storage. That is one way that we can today, very effectively compete and win against, even lower cost and fast reducing, LFP imported batteries from China.
Yeah, let's go into that a little bit, Chief. New LFP batteries from China are flooding the market right now. So how do you see really responding to this in the landscape? You touched on that a little bit. Let's go into that. Like, can second life batteries compete on cost? What do you do in this situation to really try to make this work?
Yeah, it's an interesting time. Battery prices have dropped faster than I think anyone expected. It has kind of followed the solar trajectory, more accurately, I think, again, than people would have predicted just a few years ago. And now that's also driven a little bit by oversupply, largely in China for LFP. So the prices are many people believe, at or below even the cost to produce. But the way that we can still compete with that is to use these relatively depreciated assets where we can be redeploying a battery that was already purchased and used once. So that does let us, even today, compete at prices very, very far below a brand new imported LFP battery. It takes some creativity to do it in that particular case, and this is a little bit of an innovative approach. I personally spent a lot of my career deploying new batteries. I spent most of my life building and deploying new batteries at Tesla. And this is a way to, I'd say, find even a lower cost trajectory for those services.
You touched on that. You spent a lot of your career at Tesla, but then you decided to do this. You decided to build Redwood Materials. So what was your aha moment that said, this is the direction I really want to go in?
Well, I think, I had a little bit of a front row seat, from my role at Tesla. I was the co-founder and CTO there, and I led our first gigafactory effort to industrialize batteries and build the 3 and the Y. And, we had this sort of view into what battery industrialization looked like. And while it's, in one hand, very obvious and intuitive, but the materials that go into batteries don't get destroyed. Whenever we mine those critical materials, the lithium, nickel, and copper and cobalt, and refine it, put it in a battery, it just stays there. So, I was very excited to sort of help architect, what I think is going to be incredibly relevant new ecosystem around how do we refine and reprocess and remanufacture those materials, as the economy begins to continue to electrify and EVs and other applications expand. And when we started at Redwood, 5-6 years ago, it was too early. No one was really doing this. There weren't many batteries coming back, but it's given us a chance to get ahead of that. And today we have 70, almost 80% market share in the U.S. So if you've ever used a lithium-ion battery, it's probably come back and been, re-refined and, all those critical materials reintroduced and used again. So to me, that's the exciting motivator.
With shifting U.S. policy and changing demand forecasts, as you said, how do you see the domestic supply chains for batteries and critical minerals evolving?
Yeah, it's a fascinating time. Of course, there's intense focus on rare earth materials. Critical materials are a kind of close cousin to that, and it's a bigger list. Think nickel and lithium, copper. These are some of and cobalt, kind of the headline critical materials that are necessary to make a lithium-ion battery today. But the U.S. doesn't have very much production of them. And, this is one, I think, really strategic benefit of actually focusing on reuse and recycling, is that once we, go to all the work and effort to refine and bring those materials into the country, we get control and possession of them, we definitely don't want to lose them again. So part of our goal is to make sure that every time, we have control of some of those elements, that we keep them, that we can reuse them again and again and refine them again and again. It's a very different mindset than the fossil fuel sort of path through its life cycle, where you have to extract, refine, and sell and utilize.
Yes, this is really what many people completely overlook, the recycling of batteries. And this will make sure places like Europe and the US will get the materials inside their own borders. As JB Straubel said, when the batteries get into our countries, we have to make sure they don't leave again, but keep the materials as we can recycle them forever. And in maybe 30 to 40 years from now, we no longer need to mine these materials and be dependent on China for those materials, but have them made locally by recycling batteries. I have made a whole video about how recycling is the key for a sustainable future, so if you want to take a deeper dive, check that one out. I will leave a link down below.
For AI companies investing in storage, what do you think matters most? Cost, reliability, or sustainability?
Ooh, geez. I think, personally, I would probably wish I could put sustainability higher on that list, but in this moment, access to more energy, the cost and reliability are definitely more important to customers today. And, not on that list, but I would even just put, getting more, expansion, growth would probably be even the top of the list in most conversations, we have today. We're deploying these Second Life, remanufactured battery systems, but the biggest value they bring is speed to deploy and access to more energy, which was maybe a little different than I would have expected if you asked me 2-3 years ago. I would have thought that, cost and some of the sustainability aspects would be a little bit higher value, but things are growing so fast today that the speed is of much more value.
And what kinds of partnerships between AI firms, utilities, and manufacturers will unlock the full potential of batteries?
Well, again, a really interesting time where, utilities, I think, are sort of being stressed. The electric utilities, in that case, are being stressed to grow and figure out how they can incorporate all of these, new requests for interconnect and load. The battery developers, the battery technology producers are sort of trying to offer solutions and new technologies in there, but the ecosystem to do that is a little bit confused and difficult to navigate right now. So I would say, finding ways to get all these different entities talking a bit more clearly would really help. Right now I see more and more cases where customers, whether it's a data center customer or a core and shell developer, are sometimes just going directly with energy services, kind of taking that, slightly off grid or maybe disconnecting from the utility conversation to go faster.
Yes, access to energy is the most important thing right now to meet the growing demand, but also helping with the AI race that needs much more energy. I don't think many people would have seen this being the case 10 years ago, but would have said renewable energy would become the most important thing. But things are just growing so fast right now.
We're seeing this all change so quickly. We're seeing it in real time. Where are we going to be in 5 years in terms of battery storage and evolution?
Oh, geez, in this moment, 5 years feels like kind of an eternity. I mean, if in the world of the rate of improvement of AI and the data center build out, 5 years is literally off the end of almost every roadmap. Almost every projection I've looked at and load growth curve, we're involved in is like 2 to 3 years. It's kind of amazing, but couple that to what utilities normally think of, and you're like 5, 10, 20 years. But to the question, directly,
we can alter that to 2-3 years.
So directly, I really see that storage is going to play an incredibly important role in offering flexibility to use more flexible generation sources like solar, maybe wind. But to give the flexibility to interconnect these data center and variable loads without putting so much stress on the local grids. And I think we're just beginning to see all of the pushback and headaches, the pushback on pricing to retail customers, the pushback on reliability. This is going to get much worse, I think, before it gets better. And, we have to start deploying technologies to make sure that the impacts of data center growth don't negatively affect, the large-scale grid users, or it'll end up kind of folding back and hurting the ability for those applications to grow. But I think storage over the next 2, 3, 5 years is the one technology I see that can break that compromise, where you can actually grow the IT loads as fast as maybe the economy should and wants them to grow, but also not totally disrupt, the status quo or the cheap, reliable cost of electricity that people expect.
Yes, things are moving incredibly fast, and we have AI coming, and it's hard to even look 5 years out in the future. But one thing I'm pretty confident in is that Tesla's energy business will only grow from here on out. We are truly only getting started. But cool to hear from JB Straubel that renewables and energy storage is the fastest to deploy and the cheapest form of energy as well. So that bodes very well for Tesla's future energy business, as demand seems to be basically endless. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.